after Abdul Muttalib passed away, Prophet Muhammad ﷺ was entrusted to Abu Talib, his uncle. In that story, what we don't hear often, he was also entrusted to Fatimah bint Asad. When Rasulullah had Fatima, his daughter, he turned to Khadija and was like, I want to name our child after my mom. And of course, she turned and was like, oh, okay, Amina, we'll name her Amina. And he looked and he said, no, I want to name our daughter after my mother. And so they named her Fatima, after Fatima bint Asad. And I think that shows how beautiful of a relationship they had, how self-sacrificing Fatima was towards Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم ربي اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي ربي يسر ولا تعسر وتمم بالخير. Inshallah, today I want to talk about the lessons from women Sahaba. The history of Islam is colored with so many beautiful characters, both men and women, but I want to focus on the women of Islam today, the women who we can take as role models, the women who we can refer back to and ponder upon how they lived their life, how they went about such difficulties, challenges, tribulations in their life. These are women who each possess exceptional qualities and attributes. These are women with beautiful characteristics that make every single person stop and wonder, what is it that drives these people to act this way? And of course, the answer is always Islam. These are women who have virtues that shine so brightly that they could illuminate centuries, right? Even now, when you open up a book, you feel your day illuminated, you feel your life illuminated with these wonderful women's stories. And that's exactly how I felt as I researched these women. I felt illuminated because of their characteristics, because of how they lived their life. And it made me wonder, how can I live my life? How can I live my life as a righteous Muslim? How can I become like these role models? These are women who are so magnificent, so beautiful, that they can serve as role models for every single woman. No matter your age, no matter your race, nothing matters really. All that matters is these are women who can serve as role models for each and every single one of us. In order to honor them and fulfill our debt to them, because we owe them so much. They are the women who are our role models and we owe so much to them. So in order to fulfill that debt to them, we're going to be taking a journey into the world of women Sahabas, where we're going to unveil and debrief the lives of these women and underline the lessons that we can take from these women. Today, I want to start by talking about a woman whose story is not very common. In fact, she's not spoken about that often. And when I first heard about her, I was wondering why I didn't know about her sooner. I was genuinely so upset because she is in a story that's commonly spoken about, but I've never heard her name before, and that really upset me. So I want to talk about the woman who softens every heart that hears about her. And this is no other than Fatimah bint Asad. Who is Fatimah bint Asad? Very simply, just so you guys understand who we're talking about, Fatimah bint Asad is the wife of Abu Talib. She is essentially the aunt of our Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. Now, before we can get more into who she is, I want to quickly just note some of her characteristics, her attributes, what makes her so special. Fatimah bint Asad is a woman whom Jibreel ﷺ came and said that she is one of the dwellers of Jannah. He came down and gave glad tidings and told Prophet Muhammad that she is one of the women who is going to be a resident of Jannah. How beautiful is that? It makes you wonder what kind of woman she is, how she led her life. She's a woman who dedicated her entire life, every single second of it, to Islam. She dedicated every single second of her life to enjoining good, to forbidding evil. She sacrificed everything she had, all her happiness, all her time, just to Rasulullah, just to our ummah, to Islam, for Allah. She's the mother of Ali radiallahu anhu and Jafar, and she has 3 other children, which you may have heard their names, but most commonly known is Ali and Jafar. So she's their parents, she's their mother actually, and she's a woman who constantly strives to do good. I can't emphasize this enough, but this was her entire life's purpose. Whenever she had the time, she would go and help out orphans, or she would go and help out the poor by doing charity, by giving her time, by sacrificing her time, whatever it may be. Going back to the story, after Abdul Muttalib passed away, Prophet Muhammad ﷺ was entrusted to Abu Talib, his uncle. In that story, what we don't hear often, he was also entrusted to Fatimah bint Asad. It was not just a father figure in that story, but there was also a mother figure in that story. And we're going to really understand why that mother figure is so important in Islam. When Prophet Muhammad ﷺ was entrusted to Abu Talib and Fatimah bint Asad, he was around 8 years old. Now I want to ask you guys a question. An 8-year-old kid, This is a very young kid, someone who can't feed themselves, someone who probably can't clothe themselves. Who is most likely to take care of an 8-year-old kid? Someone who needs to be fed, clothed, taken care of, have their hair brushed. Who is most likely to nurture and take care of this kid? The mother, right? This is in a generic household, an Islamic household, it's always the mother, the nurturer, because this is a mother's role. So at 8 years old, who's watching after this kid for most of the time? Fatima bint Asad. Fatima bint Asad is taking so much time to spend with Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, with Rasulullah. All of her time is going towards this young boy, this young child. She's feeding him. She's giving him love, care, compassion. She's clothing him. She's brushing his hair, making sure he's clean, making sure he's safe. This is what the mother does. And of course, Abu Talib has had such a big influence and help towards Prophet Muhammad. But Fatima bint Asad's actions is separate. It's completely separate. And it's important to note that Abu Talib and Fatima bint Asad, they didn't come from a rich family. They didn't come from a family with lots of money. They didn't always have the biggest, most full dinner tables. They didn't always have the best clothing. They came from a rather poor family. But none of that mattered to Rasulullah, because what Abu Talib and what Fatima bint Asad offered to him was way greater than any money, anything wealth could buy. And that was love. That was care. That was compassion. It was an open arm. It was the warmth of that household. Fatima did her best to open her arms to Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. She did her best to make sure that he did not live a life without the love of a mother. And I think that's so beautiful. Even though his mother had passed away, she never wanted Rasulullah to feel a moment of sadness because he didn't have his mother. And so she took that step and filled that position. And it's not an easy thing. We shouldn't just let this pass over our mind like it's an easy thing. This is not an easy task. Being a mother is difficult. It's hard. And she already has her own children. After Rasulullah began to receive revelation, after he received revelation, of course we know that he went through a very difficult period of time. He went through torment and torture. He went through assaults, verbal and physical. People were saying things to him. People were hurting him. And Fatima bint Asad, when she saw this, can you imagine the sorrow she felt, the sadness she felt, the anger she felt? But through it all, she would always open her arms and protect and comfort Rasulullah. And after a while, alhamdulillah, Fatima became a Muslim. She was able to take her shahada and she did become Muslim, and her kids were able to live under the shade of such a noble woman. One more thing I want to note that's very sweet, I think, when Rasulullah had Fatima, his daughter, he turned to Khadija and was like, I want to name our child after my mom. And of course, she turned and was like, oh, okay, Amina, we'll name her Amina. And he looked and he said, no, I want to name our daughter after my mother. And so they named her Fatima, after Fatima bint Asad. And I think that shows how beautiful of a relationship they had, how self-sacrificing Fatima was towards Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. He would refer to her as mother, reminiscing his own mother. Now, I want to shift gears a little bit, and I want to talk quickly about the tabligh strategy to convey Islam in Mecca. They commonly use 3 methods, and I'm going to quickly go through these 3 methods and talk a little about them. The first strategy that was used in Mecca during this time, during Prophet Muhammad's time, to convey Islam was grappling with injustices and oppression. And remember, these are very broad topics, so there's always other things that go along with it, but just very broadly, the first way that they were able to convey Islam and do their task as Muslims was by getting these oppressors, getting these stressors off the playing ground and trying to convey their religion. So their task is to get rid of these injustices and oppressions, very broadly stated. Moving on, the second strategy to convey Islam in Mecca during this time was, which I think is a very crucial method, is education and mentoring. So during our Prophet's time, they had lots of halaqas and lectures that would go around. People would come, they would talk, they would give lectures, they would give halaqas. Right after Jummah prayer, they had khutbahs. This was something that was very common. On top of that, there was also one-on-one students, right? One-on-one time with your students. During this time, a Sahaba would go and take time with a student and teach them everything they knew to convey their religion. And another way, which is very unique, I think, is the mentoring homes in Mecca during this time. For example, we can refer back to Ibn Arqam's house, which was open solely to spread knowledge. During a time when persecution and injustices were so high, Ibn Arqam was able to open his house and use it as a means to explain the Quran, talk about Islam, teach the hadiths, teach how to live and practice as a righteous Muslim. Right? So this is the second strategy. It's educating and mentoring one another. Now, the last method in Mecca at the time was morale and motivation. Don't let this just blow over as a very simple strategy. It seems simple, right? Motivating one another. Oh, hey, moral support. You got this. Keep doing what you're doing. It's more than that. It's a heavy job. It's a hard job. And this is exactly where Fatima bint Asad played a role. She was the one who was providing the morale and the motivation of a mother. And this is not something that's simple. You can't hear this motivation from just anybody, but this was coming from his mother. It was so powerful to Rasulullah, especially when we refer back to the hardships that Rasulullah went through, the persecution, the torture, the injustices from the Quraysh. Having that morale and motivation from his mother is a driving force for him. Reflect upon your own lives. Whenever you had a situation going on, whenever you had a tough time or you didn't know what to do, who did you go to? Your mother, right? You always go to your mother. Mother's support is unlike any other support. The one who wipes away your tears, the one who offers a shoulder to cry on. It's unlike anything else. And Fatima bint Asad's characteristics, her love, her care, her compassion, her motivation, it has a ripple effect. It positively influences others. So as she cared and comforted for Rasulullah was able to go and care and comfort for his ummah. It's very important to remember her selflessness and her compassion to Rasulullah during this time. And it's very important that we don't just blow over it, saying that it's just morale, it's just motivation. What she did for Rasulullah enabled Rasulullah to in turn care and love his ummah, provide for his ummah. The mother's love, a mother's companionship, or a mother's compassion. So these are the 3 tabligh strategies in Mecca at this time that are still things we can see in this day and age, right? First, we said addressing issues of injustice. Second was educating and mentoring. And third was morale and motivation. These are things that we can also take upon ourselves to do in this day and age, because these are roles that need to be filled. And if we don't fill them, who's going to fill these roles? Fatima bint Asad's overall task, her overall mission throughout her life was striving to do good. It was loving, it was self-sacrificing for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And we can clearly see that in her life. Fatima bint Asad's death is a story like none other. It's one that's filled with sorrow, filled with heartache, but also so beautiful to reflect upon. Because this is the story that truly shows how much Rasulullah cared for his mother, unlike any other woman. 4 years after Hijrah, our optimistic prophet had to face the death of his mother, of Fatima bint Asad. He was filled with sorrow that day, of course. It was a time of darkness for him. And in his sadness, he said these words: "Today, my mother has passed away." During Fatima bint Asad's janazah, Prophet Muhammad ﷺ took his shirt off and offered it to be used as her shroud, for her to be wrapped up in. And of course, he led the janazah prayer himself. And while it might look like it was just a couple of people praying that janazah prayer, what we couldn't see is that hundreds of angels, thousands of angels had come to pray that prayer as well. We can't see this, but there are so many angels there with him. After her body was placed into the grave, Rasulullah went down into her grave and laid there for a while, and of course, cried. He cried enough that her entire grave could have been filled with tears. And after, this behavior of our Prophet, of Rasulullah, was not done for no reason. In fact, it was done because any grave touched by our blessed Prophet would one day become the gardens of paradise. And as the Sahabas were watching this scene, watching her janazah go down, they were amazed. They were so surprised to see how he was acting, how sad he was. Why? Because they've never seen Rasulullah become so sad and be so attached to someone as much as Fatima bint Asad. And so the companions, they went up to Prophet Muhammad ﷺ and they asked, "We have not witnessed the sincere affection that you show to Fatima towards any other woman. Why are you giving so much affection and care towards this woman, unlike anyone else?" And so Rasulullah responded, and the first thing he said was, "She was my mother." 3 times. She was my mother. She was my mother. She was my mother. And I think this would have been enough in itself as an explanation. But he continued, and he said, "She fed me while her own children were hungry. She combed my hair and clothed me while her own children's head and clothing were covered in dirt. She was my mother. After my uncle Abu Talib, there was no one who helped me as much as she has. I covered her with my cloak, with my shirt, so that she may be dressed in the robes of heaven. I lowered her into her grave, so that she may account for herself more easily in the grave." And after she was buried, Rasulullah made a very heartfelt and sincere dua for his mother. He said, "May Allah have mercy on you and reward you with goodness. You were a mother to me. You fed me even when you were hungry, and you did all this for the sake of Allah's pleasure and in anticipation of the abode of the hereafter. O Allah, forgive my mother Fatima bint Asad and brighten her grave. Accept my prayers for the sake of your messenger and the previous prophets. And, well, very heartfelt, later Jibreel alayhi salam came down and gave glad tidings, saying that Fatima bint Asad was one of the dwellers of Jannah. And of course, this made our Prophet so happy because he learned that his mother was going to be able to taste the fruits of Jannah and be able to live in paradise. In Surah Al-Imran, it says that they believe in God and the last day, encourage good and forbid evil, and race with one another to do good. They are truly among the righteous. They will never be denied the reward of any good they have done. This ayah shows us so beautifully the characteristics of Fatima bint Asad, how she lived her life, striving to do good, constantly racing to do good. And we see that she was never denied any goodness from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because now she's one of the dwellers of Jannah. She's one of those who are going to be able to taste the fruits in Jannah and live in that paradise. This was the value of serving, of respecting, of loving Rasulullah. This is what we can achieve just by loving our Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. It shows the importance of enjoining good, in forbidding evil, and in loving our Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. May Allah grant us the companionship of this noble woman in the hereafter, and may Allah allow us to be one of the women, one of the people, the righteous Muslims who are able to race to do good, enjoying good and forbid evil, and constantly convey their religion in a beautiful manner. Ameen walhamdulillahi rabbil alameen.
We have new and amazing videos coming up.
Don't forget to like,
Subscribe and comment.
Stay tuned.